It's Board Games with PeedMont.
Welcome back, gamers. Today we're going to check out the game Urbian, a one-player game by Z-Man Games in which you take on the role of the king of the dream world and have to restore balance to your cities. Now, of course, if you already know how to play the game, go ahead and click on the box and jump straight to my conclusions. Otherwise, let's find out what's in the box and how it's played. Inside of Urbian, you will find basically two decks of cards. Let me get all this stuff out here quick and show you. One of which is just what we're going to call the Dream Deck, which has all these cards, different positive and minus values, different icons on the top, depending on which cities they can go on. And then there's basically the other half of the Dream Deck. And then you have 16 city cards. Each city card has two symbols on it, basically which cards can be played on it. This is a water and an air city. And as part of one of the expansions, there are 4 of these kind of wild card cities, and we'll get to that in a little bit later. Next, there are 2 polarity cards. This is for the 2-player variant. It's kind of interesting. Basically, each player can only play a positive or negative card on their turn, and you can take an action to switch these. So that's that. And you also get, I think, 10 of these special power cards. These are for the other expansion, the Book of, I think, a Book of Powers. And each one lets you do a special kind of like a rule-breaking action. And we'll take a look at that also later. And finally, there are 2 sheets of instructions. One is for the basic game, and the other is the Book of Powers expansion. I'm actually going to stop right there, because I got this game a while ago. I played it a bunch, and was basically in the middle of doing a fairly negative review of the game. When I was going through the expansion rulebook, because I hadn't really played the expansions, I kind of want to get to know how the basic game works before I jump into expansions. But I wanted to explain that well, and as going through this, I found something kind of startling and important, and which kind of really is upsetting to me. Basically, the rules are on these sheets. They come out, and this one, like I said, has the basic game, and it's one sheet, and you read through the whole thing, and the game is playable. It makes some sense. It seems like you left something out. In Onirim, Shadi Torbey's other game, there are nightmares, and there are multiple ways of dealing with that. And with the chaos cards, there wasn't. They always just kind of went on one side or another, and we'll get all into it in a minute. But I read through this, and the game made enough sense that I was playing it, and was fairly unhappy. I check out this expansions rule sheet, which is the way it comes by Z-Man Games, and the front half is the expansion rules, and this back half is the last third of the basic game instructions. Like basically, I've been playing the game wrong the entire time because I had never thought to open up the expansion rulebook to find the rest of the normal game's rules. And this explained how you deal with the chaos cards and how the 2-player game is played and all these things that just weren't in the rules and I was really confused about. And that really bummed me out, and I wish that either these had all been in one book or there was some notification on the rules that there's a third more to be known about this game in the expansion book. So that really changed my mind. I had to go back and play the game a bunch to see how I felt about it, because you can't get a good, accurate understanding of the game by only playing it with 2/3 of the rules. So that's how it goes. So in the basic game of Urbian, you're going to take the Dream Deck, shuffle those up, set it to one side. Take the City Deck, shuffle those up and set it to one side. And then you draw 4 cities. 1, 2, 3, 4. You put them in this vertical column like this because there's going to be negative and positive side to it, and you're trying to balance it out. And you basically put 2 cards for each city. So I have a -3 and a +2. It doesn't really matter that they don't match up with the city icons, but we'll go over that in a second. +1, -3, -3, -3, -3, and +4. Then you draw 4 cards for your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. You'll see on each card, up in the top right and left hand corner, there's a symbol. This is, I guess, a wave. And then below that is the polarity. It says a +1. Basically, this means this can only be played on a city that shares the wave symbol. Like you can see, this city is a fire and a wave. So I could play this +1 on this city, which has a -3 and a +1. Now, playing a card is the first basic action. I'll play this one over here. So now I have a +2 on one side and a -3 on the other. That's almost balanced. After you play a card, you draw a card. Now, I could do the same thing. I have another +1. I could balance that out. But let's look at the other actions you can do. Besides playing a card, you can discard a card. And that lets you do one of two things. Discarding a card first lets you swap two cards on the same side. So let's see here. This is a -3. I have a card that's a +4. I have a card that's a +2 and a -3. Maybe I want to switch this +2 with this +4. And they swap sides. You can only do this on the same side, so I can only swap positive and positive, and I couldn't move a card from one spot to an empty one. They actually have to swap cards. I could do the same thing with the negatives if I wanted to. Additionally, if I want to discard a card, the other thing I can do, let's say I played this other one here, and we have a +3 and a -3. I could discard a card on my turn. I could take a card and discard it. Maybe I don't need all these -3s. And check for balance. Right now I have one, this is a +4, -3, no good. +3, -3, perfect, balanced. That's the only one that I have balanced. When I do that, you get rid of those cards. You could put them in the discard pile. And claim that city. It's basically a victory point that you get. One point, and you're trying to collect all of them to win the game. New city comes out, and you do the same thing. 2 cards go there. Oh, I just drew 2 chaos cards, and we'll get into these right now. Now, when you get these chaos cards, these are the real crux of the game. These are the things you have to worry about. These are +5s, and they have to go on the more powerful side. You could get to choose which one they go on if you draw one, but if you're putting them down just as when you put out a new city, they basically both going to go on the same side, or if you have a +1, it's going to go on the +1 side, etc., etc. There are a number of ways to deal with these. If you draw them in your hand, you have to play them instantly, and you choose which city they go on, and they get a +5 to the most powerful side. That's pretty bad. So you don't always have to do that. You can get rid of them by removing all the cards from one balanced city. So maybe I had one city that had finally balanced and I drew this chaos card that would ruin everything. So I could get rid of the chaos card and get rid of all the cards that were on that one balanced city. If that's not your best option, there's also a third way you can get rid of them. You can discard the top 4 cards of the dream deck to get rid of one. Now that gets a little dicey, because as soon as you run out of the dream deck, the game is over. And this is a very difficult game, so you have to be really smart about how you deal with these chaos cards. Finally, the last thing why unbalancing a city is so detrimental, but maybe necessary when you get these chaos cards, is if you manage to balance all of the cities, again, I'll just pretend that these are all balanced. If you manage to get all 4 balanced at the same time, and then you discard a card to check for balance, which is really difficult, you get to take all of the cities, obviously, because all the cards clear, and you get all the cities. But you also get to take one additional one from the top of the city pile, which basically means you would get 5 points. And that's a much more efficient way to get rid of this city deck than to just do them individually one at a time. You always want to try and get as many as you can. And the final thing are these expansion cards from the Book of Powers. You can see they have the book icon on the back, which do a number of special things. Basically, at the start of the game, if you want to play with these, you shuffle these up, and you decide how many you want. You take one, and every time you do, you have to get 2 cards off the deck that are just gone, which makes that dream deck smaller and makes it basically run out quicker. But these give you special powers and kind of add to the theme. Since you're the king of dreams, it's kind of nice to have some extra special powers and ways to manage this game. I think they add a little bit easier. 2 cards is pretty powerful for some of the things they let you do, but in this case, this one lets you move a negative card. Basically, you could, when you discard a card, you could move one to an empty spot. Whereas I said earlier, you can do that. You had to switch 2 cards. This one lets you move one into an empty spot, which is nice. Or this one lets you discard a card to look at the top 2 cards of the deck and rearrange them however you want. Cool stuff. They add a little bit of flavor to the game. They seem a little powerful for just 2 cards at a time. And the game kind of recommends that if you want to make it even harder, make it 3 per power or 4 per power. So you can do that how you like. So that's Urbian. It's kind of a neat solitaire game. It's very different. I mean, I love solitaire games. I actually played thousands of games of solitaire on my computer trying to get the perfect score. So I was really interested in this. Now, I kind of got it because I was interested in Onirim, and that's out of print. And I read some reviews that said this was maybe a little more difficult and actually more fun. And I agree and disagree with both of those things. I'm going to go a little kind of crazy exposition on this, but I think it's important because this game could have been just a pillar of design and beauty. Now, Shadi Torbey makes these kind of really interesting games, and he has this really unique artist who does these pictures, basically. They are dreamlike. They're fluffy, there's these watercolors, they're really strange. but it all kind of gets mucked up with these icons. I mean, they're just kind of sitting up here. They don't really work with the whole rest of the card. They go into the borders. The icons aren't really easy to understand. I mean, on the black cards, they just get lost because there's a lot of black on them. And I just don't get it, why they're weird shaped. And the other problem is that they're just, I mean, that's basically all you're looking at through the game. You're looking at the city cards that show these icons. And then you're looking at these little bit of the card. This icon and this positive or negative. So you're really focusing just on these numbers, +2, -2, and the whole rest of it can go away. And it's really kind of distracting because the pictures don't necessarily completely match what the icons are showing you. So it's really easy, especially in the beginning where you're placing the cards down next to the cities and they don't have to match. It's easy to mess something up later by playing a card on a spot and forgetting that, oh shoot, this was only could be fires here because there are waters on it just because of the initial game. So that it makes it very tricky, and I think it could have been done very well. Like, I mean, okay, so this is a -2 water, but there are 3 dudes on it, and I can kind of see where they're water-ish, but it just seems like you could have actually done away with all of the icons. If the city cards, instead of just being kind of random, if maybe the city cards were just filled up with fire and water people, positive and negative, and that's all that was on that card, you could get rid of this. And if the cards just showed, just showed 2 negative water people, or this showed 2 positive cloud people, you could get rid of all of this, and it would be less about balancing a math equation and about, I need to bring balance to the city. I need to get the people the same on both sides. So I'd just be able to look at the card. All right, this is 3 air people, good air people. This is 3 negative air people. I wouldn't need any icons on it. I could just look at the cards done in this kind of beautiful art style and know what was going on. And that, I think, would have felt really immersive and would have been just really praised for how simply it was designed. But unfortunately, it's not. All I'm looking at are these little kind of poorly done, like MS Paint icons up on the top of these cards. And I wish it wasn't. I think it could have been much better. So, Shady, if you have any questions for the next game, let me know. I'll check it out for you. Right, so how do I like the game? For fun, I gave Urbian a score of 6. It is challenging, and I mean, I like the challenge, and I like the idea. And it's something that I come back and play every once in a while, because it is a little heady, and I don't really think it's as great as it could have been. But it still gets a score of 6, something I come back to and play if I want to challenge and kind of maybe really want to get into this dream world theme. For strategy, I gave Urbian a score of 7. There's a lot to going on. You got to try and decide where I'm going to move these to. You kind of got to know how the deck is set up. I mean, there are only, like for the fires, the positives are only +4, and you need to kind of know that and work around it and know how many there are in the deck. You need to decide what to do with those chaos cards when they come out. You have a couple options, and you really need to make the best choices in order to win the game, because like I said, it's not an easy game. For ease, I guess I gave it a score of 2. I didn't really realize that the rules were split up on 2 separate sheets, and it's not overly easy to understand. I guess, like I said, the icons and the way they match up with the city tiles and the fact that you can move them around early in the game makes it a little confusing. You really have to pay attention, and it's real easy to mess up and then later kind of think back and realize, did I cheat? Not purposefully, but just happened. And then that really ruins it for you because it's so difficult that you really want to try and win the game and not feel like you've cheated. For replayability, I gave Urbian a score of 4. You do kind of want to come back to it quite often because it is fairly difficult and you want to win and see if you can do better. And the Book of Powers expansion means if you use this, every game's going to be different. You can have some new things that you can do and some new powers. So that's fun and makes you want to come back to it more than maybe if it was just vanilla. For randomness, I gave Urbian a score of -4. It is a card game, so depending on how things are, you can get just stuck with a bunch of those chaos cards very early and not have any good way to deal with them. You can be waiting and waiting for that +4 that you know is in the deck, but it's just not coming out when you think it might. So that can bum it for you, and I mean, it's very easy to do very poorly just because of pure randomness. For setup, I give Urbian a score of -2. I mean, there's a couple things to shuffle, dealing with picking out the Book of Power special cards, and then every time you do the cities, you have to add 2 on each side. So it's not major, but there is some setup involved in the game. Cost, I gave Urbian a cost score of -1. I think I picked this up for $7 at my local game store. It is just kind of a single player, and it does have a 2-player variant, but it's not really designed for that. That's a little weird. So for just a little 1-player game, I mean, maybe just for the artwork alone is pretty much worth the $6 or $7, $8 you can pay for it. Players, this is just a weird one that it gets a score of 1 because it was really designed as a 1-player, I guess, a solitaire game, which is really interesting when we talk about board games. Not many of those exist, and Shadi Torbey is one of the few that makes games specifically for 1 player. He's got a couple out, Onigrim and Urbian, and there are, I guess, 2 more coming out in the near future that I'm excited to check out. Theme, for Urbian, I gave the theme a score of 2. I really think this could have been a game that would have gotten a theme of 5, which would really bumped up the game score for me. The artwork is there, and the idea is there, and I mean, he has names for the good and bad guys, the Incubi and Songe, perhaps, something like that. I mean, there's this whole... It's clear that the idea was there, but maybe it was just lost in translation when it got to the artist. Because I think it could have been just amazingly well designed to fit this theme. I mean, these Book of Power cards is an expansion, but they're just miserable. These icons on them are terrible. And they don't relate in any way to to the rest of the game. They could have been really well done. But even more egregious are the actual cards themselves. Like I said, the art is amazing and unique, but nothing about the actual art says anything about what's going on in the card. And I mean, the artwork is, like 99% of the card. The only thing you cared about is these tiny little icons. And because you were working at it with a +1, -2, these numbers, just as pure numbers, it starts to feel like math homework rather than trying to bring balance to this dream world. And like I said, I think in my little rant earlier, I think it could have been very well done and really unique, done away with all icons and just been purely about what's on the cards, which would have drawn you in more and just been amazingly beautiful to look at and I think well designed. Quality, I give Urbian a score of 2. There are lots of cards, but that's my same argument. The art is amazing, but it really just gets ruined for me with the icons on each one. They're just kind of lazily done. The wild is hard to tell what the heck you're actually looking at. Some of the Book of Powers cards icons, like the circles, aren't really circles. I don't really get it. And I think it could have been done much better. I guess the other thing, too, is that there's nothing in the rules that states that the other third of the rules is in the expansion booklet. I think that is just terrible and probably has put a lot of people off the game. If you were like me, not wanting to jump right into the expansions, you only get 2/3 of the rules, and it can be really confusing and not nearly as fun and balanced as it should have been with the whole rest of the rules. Duration, I gave Urbian a duration score of 2. It takes up between about 15, maybe 20 minutes if you're really thinking, but you just kind of go and go and go, so there's no real analysis paralysis that goes on. You just kind of start doing it, and you get a feel for the game after playing a few playthroughs. So it gets a score of 2. It's over fairly quickly, and that's kind of good with the high amount of randomness, so it doesn't really make you super angry if something doesn't quite go your way. All in all, I gave Urbian a score of 65. Like I said earlier, I had it much lower because I couldn't understand it, and I think it could have been much higher in both fun and theme scores. Would have been really maybe much higher up if it was done so that it wasn't just looking at those little icons. I mean, I can't really express how much that makes me sad, because only when it really feels like you're kind of in this, and the icons make sense, and doesn't seem like they're just thrown on at the last minute. Whereas these, like I said, the +2 and -2 and these things, it's just not, I don't know, I think it could have been amazing, but unfortunately it's not. Hey guys, thanks again for watching. If you like what I'm doing, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you want to see my earlier stuff, go on and click here. And I was only hard on this game because I think it could have been so awesome.